Okay, we're going to talk about the circulatory system now and the cardiovascular system, which is the circulatory system combined with the respiratory system. So what this involves is getting oxygen into our cells for cell respiration, carbon dioxide out, and not only that, delivering the sugars and other nutrients that our cells need for cell respiration. So this is an example of a respiratory organ, the gills of a salmon. This is allowing gas exchange to get that gas ultimately to the cells. Okay, so if we look at circulatory systems of vertebrates are, again, animals with backbones. If you look at fish, they basically have a two-chambered heart, and then that gets pumped to their gills where it gets oxygenated. So the red side, this is showing oxygenated blood, and that gets carried to muscles and organs and things that need the oxygen where it gets deoxygenated and back to the heart. So this is one simple circuit. The heart's pumping, and that works fine if you're a fish. You're in water, it's very buoyant. There's not a lot, you don't need a lot of pressure to keep pushing that blood because you're in this watery, very buoyant environment. If you're on land, like an amphibian, okay, now you've got a little more problem because you're having to pump it up to your head and down to your lower parts. So you need a little more pressure. So it goes to your lungs where it gets oxygenated, and then it goes back to the heart where it gets repumped. So now we can provide more pressure, more power to get that blood pumped to our body, to our muscles and organs, deliver that oxygen, and then reoxygenated blood goes back to our heart where it goes back to our lungs. If you look at this, though, there's just 3 chambers here, 1, 2, 3, which means that there's some mixing of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. That's not as efficient, right? We want all the oxygenated blood going to our body and the deoxygenated blood going to our lungs. So mammals and birds have a 4-chamber heart. So you can see here, the oxygenated blood just goes to our body, muscles and organs. Deoxygenated blood just goes what's called the pulmonary circuit to our lungs where it gets oxygenated. So this is a much more efficient way to deliver oxygenated blood where it needs to go and deoxygenated blood to where it needs to go. So now let's look a little closer. So here's the human cardiovascular system. You can see the 4 chambers of the heart, right? And then you can see the things that take blood away from the heart are called arteries. The ones that are taking it to our lungs are called pulmonary arteries. Okay? The ones that are taking it to the rest of our body, the main one is called the aorta, and then it's broken up into smaller arteries that go up to your carotid artery, goes up to your head, through your neck, and then other arteries go down through your body. Okay? The vessels that take blood back from your body to your heart are called veins. So here, taking the deoxygenated blood from the head and body are the inferior and superior vena cava, and then the pulmonary veins are taking in the oxygenated blood back from the lungs to the heart. So veins don't just carry deoxygenated blood, they really just carry any blood back to the heart. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. So if we look at the heart a little closer, we can see that it's got 4 chambers. Now when we're looking at this heart, it looks like the left side, well wait a minute, that's the right side, right? And the right is on the left side. But remember, we're looking at a heart, so if I'm looking at my heart, the right side is over here, the left side is over here. So if you're looking at it, right is left and left is right. So on the right side, we have the top part is called the atrium, okay? That's going to pump blood down here into the ventricle. Ventricles are V-shaped, okay? Then when the right ventricle contracts, it's going to pump blood out to the pulmonary arteries where it goes to the lungs and gets oxygenated. So that part is blue on the diagram to show that's deoxygenated blood. The blood is going to return through the pulmonary veins, again, returning blood to the heart are veins. This oxygenated blood then gets pumped from the left atrium into the left ventricle, and then when that contracts, it goes up through the aorta, the largest artery in your body, where it gets delivered to your head, your muscles, your organs, all parts of the body. So the way your heart contracts is the atrium contract, and then the ventricles contract. We want to do this, we want to have this timed. We have a little structure called a pacemaker on our heart that times this so that the blood continues to flow in the proper sequence. So let's look at that right now. So you can see the pacemaker is going to time it such that the first thing that contracts are the atria, and when they contract, they push blood into the ventricles. Okay, we're going to wait just a tiny little support for that blood to fill up, and then the ventricles are going to contract, and when they do, they're going to push blood out into the arteries. Okay? Then this is going to repeat, where the atria contract and the ventricles contract. And when you listen to a heartbeat, it makes a lub-dub sound. The lub is the atria contracting, and the dub is the ventricles contracting. Notice there's more muscle around the ventricles because they really have to exert a lot more force. They're pushing that blood all over the body. So they're going to be thicker, more muscular, because they need that extra power to pump blood. So again, when you look, if you've ever seen an EKG, that's an electrocardiogram, that's basically showing the electrical activity around your heart. Remember, we looked at action potentials, and they had a similar sort of frequency where we got a little bump, and then a big bump, and then it went down. But when we're looking at an EKG, the electrical activity, the nerves that are firing around the heart, we see that there's a little bump first. That's when the pacemaker is signaling the muscles around the atria to contract. Notice there's not as much muscle tissue up there, so that's a smaller depolarization, at least that we sense in the EKG. And then we get this big spike. That spike is when the ventricles contract. So the ventricles contracting, there's a lot more nerves that are firing at that point, and that's senses a lot more, obviously, action potentials, a lot more depolarization. So that's that second wave there. Okay, so again, you know someone's alive if you put an EKG up and you see these periodic bumps. Little bump from the atrium, big bump from the ventricle. When we see someone that is flatlined, there's no electrical activity of the heart. Their heart is not beating, and they are dead. They are flatlined. Okay, so that's sort of how our nervous system is connected to our heart, and those electrical sensors, those neurons connecting there, are creating that sensation, the EKG. Okay, when we look at blood vessels, now blood vessels, remember, are also composed of smooth muscle. We talked about smooth muscles, a type of smooth muscle. Inside of that, we have epithelial tissue lining the vessels. Okay, it's kind of slippery. It allows the blood to kind of slip through. And then we have connective tissue on the outside. So we actually have different layers. Arteries, again, that carrying blood away from the heart, tend to be a little bit thicker, a little bit more muscular, because as the heart contracts, there's a lot more pressure in our arteries. So they need to be thicker and have thicker, smooth muscle. Veins are a little bit thinner, okay? Now, veins in the connective tissue have sort of a purplish color. A lot of people think that's the deoxygenated blood. It's just the color of the connective tissue in the veins, not the actual deoxygenated blood. You can't see the blood in your veins. But veins also have valves in them, because the pressure in our veins is very low. It's not strong enough so that, for example, from our feet, that blood could get up through our body. So we have valves that basically prevent blood from flowing backwards back down into our feet. So if we look at how that works, let's say this is your leg or a lower extremity. You've got these veins and these valves in the veins. And when muscles contract, they squeeze that blood, and since we have valves, it can only push it in one direction. That guarantees that blood only flows in one direction back to the heart and doesn't just pool up in your feet, right? So occasionally these valves can break, and then the blood will flow back, and your veins will swell up, and you'll have varicose veins. Very unattractive, but a reality of people as they get older. So now when we look at blood flowing through the body, we can start to see some things that are happening. Number one, as blood flows from the aorta to arteries to capillaries, the little tiny blood vessels, the surface area increases, right? So the increased surface area, because that's where those capillaries are now bathing all of our cells and allowing for gas exchange, okay? The blood flow, as it flows away from the heart through the aorta into the arteries, also slows down. So it's going slower so that the carbon dioxide and oxygen can diffuse in and out of the cells. So an inverse relationship between sort of the surface area gets bigger, the speed gets slower. That allows for better exchange in this area, right? The speed is going to increase as it goes back up the veins into the heart, okay? The pressure is going to go down, and you can see the pressure in the arteries actually varies up and down as the heart beats. When the heart goes up, that's called the systole. When it's not beating, that's the diastole pressure. So as it beats, it goes between those two, systole and diastole. And then as it gets into the capillaries, the pressure goes down, and in the veins it's even lower. So that's why we have valves in our veins that allow blood in that low pressure to continue moving in one direction and move back up to our heart from the bottom of our body. So this is an overview of the cardiovascular system, the heart, arteries, capillaries, veins, and things that allow for our body to circulate blood, oxygen, and nutrients. Okay?